Om Shuklam Bharadharam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Bhignopashantaye Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada Yenaksharasamaamnayam Adhigamya Maheshwarat Kritsnam Vyakarnam Proktam Tasmai Paninaye Namaha Vakyakaram Vararuchim Bhashyakaram Patanjalim Paninim Sutrakarancha Pranatosmi Munitrayam Bhagartha Viva Samprikto Bhagartha Pratipattaye Jagatav Pitarau Vande Parvati Parameshwarau Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Namaste everyone. Welcome to class. It's nice to see everyone. So I will share my screen with you. So I hope you were able to review some of what we covered last time. So what we talked about last time was we were getting into nouns. So we've been talking a lot about verbs for the past few months, and now we're kind of going on to nouns. Because, right, in a sentence of vakyam, there's only two types of padam, two types of words. There's tingantam padam and subantam padam. Tingantam padam is made up of dhatuhu plus ting pratyaya, and we've seen a lot of details about the dhatu, and we've seen a lot of details about ting pratyaya. Now we're getting into a little bit of subantam, right? So subantam, right, is made up of two things. It's made up of pratipadikam. It's made up of pratipadikam plus supratyaya. All right. So pratipadikam plus supratyaya. It's made up of those two things. When we add a pratipadikam plus a supratyaya, when we add that nominal base or that noun base, and we add that nominal suffix, the noun suffix, when we add that to those two things, that's what we call declension. Declension of a noun. So declension is just this addition. When we add these two things, that's what we call declension. Okay, so now we have a little bit of details that we need to talk about pratipadikam that we covered in the last class. Okay, so pratipadikam is made up of, or things we need to consider. So things to consider are, one is the we talked about gender of the pratipadikam. So is it masculine? Is it neuter, or is it feminine? Punlinga, napumsakalinga, or strilinga? And what is the ending letter? Right, so those are some of the things that we have to consider when we're looking at the pratipadika. What is its gender? And sometimes, right, it's a Bhagavan given gender, it's already there, or it takes the gender based on what it's around, right? If it's an adjective, it takes the gender of the substantive, you know? But some just have gender inherent to that word. So let's see. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to find. Okay, so where we left off last time, so I'm just going to close these for a second. We'll come back to it. So we saw that there's gender, and we saw that the ending letter, for example, if we have the word Rama, Rama ends with a, so we know it's masculine, and it ends with a. So let me write that on the board. So right, Rama, it's masculine, Pullinga, and it ends with akara. So when we're writing this, when we're trying to give information about it, we'll say it's akaranta, akaranta, Pullinga, Shabdaha. Right? It's a word, Shabda, which is Pullinga, masculine, and it's anta, ending with akara. It's ending with a. We add kara just to show that letter by itself. Kara is just that letter by itself. So when we're saying akara, akara, if it ends with na, we'll say it's nakara, nakaranta, etc. Okay? So we saw that we have to look at the gender. We also have to look at what it's ending with. So this is one example here. Now, one particular thing is that some pratipadikas have to be identified by the last few letters. So not just by the last one letter, but some have to be identified by the last few letters because of differences between declension. So if you look at the example on the board, Atman is, we wouldn't say na ending because yogin is also na ending, right? Both end with nakara. Both end with na. But un and in, they decline differently. So that's why we have to look at the last two letters for this one. We have un, atman, un. So this is unending, and yogin, in, right? Yogin. It's in ending, right? So because it's in ending, it's going to decline differently than unending. So some have to be identified then by the last few letters because of differences in the declension. Okay, is that clear? Thumbs up if that's clear. Thumbs down if it's not. Okay, I see some thumbs up. If you give me a thumbs down and I don't see you, just tell me, put a question mark in the chat. Okay, now more basic categorization is vowel ending or consonant ending. Vowel ending is what we call ajanta. That which ends anta with the vowel. Now, vowel is called ach, and this is based on Maheshwara Sutra. But if you don't know what Maheshwara Sutra is, don't worry. It's anta ending with a vowel. Vowel is called ach. Vowels are named ach. So we can divide pratipadikas in this two basic categorization if we don't want to think too much, either vowel ending or consonant ending. Consonant ending is called halanta. That which ends anta with the consonant. The consonant is called hal. So hal anta. It's consonant ending, right? So we can either look at the specific letter. So like if we think of Rama, it's a ending. Some of them we need to look at the last two letters, like yogin, in. We have to look at those last letters. But if we just want to make a more basic, more general division, we can just say there's vowel ending, ajanta, achanta, or consonant ending, halanta, hal ending. Okay, so those are some more basic categorization. So again, we're talking about nouns, subantam. Subantam is made up of pratipadikam and supratyaya. Pratipadika, we have to look at two things in pratipadika. What are the two things? Gender and ending letter. Okay, now gender and ending letter. If that's as much you get, then that's good enough. Okay, so now we need to look at supratyaya. We already got some information. We already learned a little bit about pratipadika. Now we have to look at the other half of a noun, right? Because a noun is made up of two things, we now have to look and focus on the supratyaya. So there's a question. Magesh, I've unmuted you if you have a question. Is there a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is the ending letter determine the gender? So if that is the case, how can we determine both gender and ending letter for a noun?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to mute you. Let me know if your question's still not answered. But the ending letter does not dictate the gender. They're two different concepts. Sometimes they're linked, but the ending letter is not what tells you the gender. The gender is something that we just know from tradition, basically. We have to learn, we have to kind of memorize which words have some gender. But based on that gender and based on the ending letter, then it's going to decline differently. It's going to form it's going to make a different form later on. But they're two different concepts. So one doesn't affect the other. The gender doesn't affect the ending letter. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so these two basically determine how the declension is arrived at, right?
Yeah, these two determine how the declension is arrived at, correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. And then also we need to look at two more things, right? These two things on the screen are under supratyaya. One is case and the other is number. Okay. So this is on page, if we open our book, this is on page 870. It's page 72. Okay, so I'm going to cover this up. I know you can't see it, but case is what we call vibhakti. Okay, a case is what we call vibhakti. So, and there's 7 cases from 1 to 7. So if you look a little bit lower on page 72, you'll see this chart right here. So if you notice on the left side of this chart, there's 7 cases. First case, second case, third case, fourth case, fifth case, sixth case, seventh case, right? And what is this important for? This case, the vibhakti, tells you the role which the pratipadika plays in the sentence. What role does it play in the sentence? So example, if I say, Ramaha gacchati. Okay, so I have a noun, I have Ramaha. And Ramaha is made up of pratipadika Rama plus sakara, which becomes visarga. Right? That this sa becomes this the two dots. It transforms later on. But this sakara tells me vibhakti, tells me it's prathama vibhakti, tell me it's first case. And first case is generally the doer of action. We're going to learn all of this, but I just want to show what it's telling us. So this sakara tells me that it's going to be the doer, the karta of the verb gacchati. So pratipadika supratyaya, specifically the vibhakti, conveys the role which the pratipadika plays in the sentence. For example, it tells us who is going, Rama is going. It tells us who is the doer of the action, right? So it tells us what role is it playing. The second thing it tells us, right, is number. It indicates number. So number is what we call vachanam. Vachanam, number. Right? So these two things are incredibly important. Case, vibhakti, and vachanam, number. Now number, if you look at below, right? It says singular, dual, and plural. Is it going to give us? Okay. Singular, dual, plural. We already learned the Sanskrit words for those. Okay, can someone tell me in the chat, what is the Sanskrit word for singular? Yep, ekavachanam. Ekavachanam. Nope, ekavachanam. Oh, I'm only typing privately to everyone. Okay, so ekavachanam. Then the middle one is dvivachanam. Dvivachanam. Right, it says it, and then it says plural is bahuvachanam. So ekavachanam, dvivachanam, and bahuvachanam. That's also on page 72 under number. Ekavachanam, dvivachanam, bahuvachanam. Okay, so there's 7 cases, there's 3 numbers. Ekavachanam means singular, dvivachanam, dvi means 2, right? So dual, and bahu means many. So bahuvachanam is plural. Eka means 1, dvi means 2, bahu means many. So singular, dual, and plural. We have those 3 numbers, and those 3 numbers tell us, if I can find what I'm looking for. It tells us the number of pratipadika, right? So if I say Ramaha, Ramaha is only one person, right? So it's ekavachanam. That ekavachanam thing, it means there's singular, there's only one. So we have to know what role it plays in the sentence. We also have to know how many of them there are. Is there one person? Is there 2 people? Or is there plural? Is there multiple people? Is there 1 tree, 2 trees, or is there many trees? Okay, so we're cruising on. Let me know if you have a question because I'm moving a little bit fast. But 2 basic concepts. Sorry, I got distracted by the question, but I'll get to the question in a second. So there's 2 basic concepts, right? There's in the pratipadika, we have to look at gender and ending letter. Okay, now in the supratyaya, we have to look at 2 things, vibhakti, case, and vachanam, number. Now there's one question that says, How come you're saying there's only 7 cases? In some books, they say there's 8 cases. Okay, so in some books you may see 8 cases, but the factual, according to Panini Muni, there's only 7. There's only 7. But that first case sometimes gets transformed a little bit, and that transformation of the first case is sometimes what we call the 8th case. We call Sambodhanam. So the transformation of the first case sometimes is what we call the 8th case, but really that's just a transformation of that first case. So, okay, so if you didn't understand what I said, don't worry. There's only 7 cases. The 8th case is really just a transformation of the first, but if you call it an 8th at all. But according to Panini, there's only 7. Okay, so let's go to let's flip our page. Let's go to topic number 8. This is page 74. 74 and 75, we're gonna keep moving. Let's see. Okay. So on page 74, you'll see this chart right here. On the left, you'll see the vibhaktis, as we talked about. There's 7 divisions. So vibhakti, what vibhakti literally means is divisions. Divisions, so parts. And there's 7 divisions. And those are given different names, which we're going to talk about the names, and then there's the 3 numbers. Now, these, what are on the page, are the general divisions or vibhaktis that we're going to be talking about. There's 21 of them. Su ojas, ochas, ta bhyambis, ne bhyambyas, nasi bhyambyas, nas osam, ni osup. These 21 then get differentiated later on. So, but this is the format. These 21 get differentiated later on, and then they become different. They transform slightly, but this is the main format. So I see there's a question. I'll take the question in a minute. I just want to get to this next part. Now, each vibhakti has a different meaning attached to it. Meaning, another word for meaning is artha. So we need to talk about what is the meaning of the vibhakti. What is the artha? Right, artha means meaning of vibhakti. Because different vibhaktis have different meanings. And that's the next topic we're going to take up is vibhaktyartaha. So you can repeat after me. Vibhaktyartaha. Vibhaktyartaha. Or if we make it plural, then it's vibhaktyartaha. Vibhaktyartaha. So you can see it spelled on page 74 at the top. Okay, so vibhaktyartaha. Okay. Now, instead of pulling up the sheet, I'm going to just write it up here. It'll be a little bit easier. Okay. So these vibhaktis, they tell us the role of the pratipadika in the sentence. They tell us the role of the pratipadika in the sentence. And now this vibhakti is broken up. It could tell us, so the role can be differentiated into 2. One is karaka vibhakti. And 2 is non-karaka. So it tells us the role of the pratipadika, but that role can be separated into 2. It can tell us a karaka or a non-karaka. What do I mean by this? So a karaka, a factor of action, we've seen a little bit about before. But a karaka is basically how a noun is connected to a verb. And there are 6 different types of connections. We're going to see the 6 after some time. We've already seen the first 2. The first 2, number 1 is karta karaka. So we've seen, I see the elephant. I see the elephant. Who is the karta or the doer of the action? Who sees? I see. So the karta, the doer of the action of seeing, is what we call the karta. So that shows how the noun is connected to the verb. Who does it? I do it. Okay? And then there's 5 more, which we're going to talk about, but I wanted to give just one example of the karta karaka. Then we'll talk about karma. So based on a karaka, the vibhakti will communicate a karaka, or the vibhakti can communicate something else other than a karaka. Vibhakti can communicate number 1, or it can communicate something else. Okay. Now, oftentimes what happens is people equate karaka and vibhakti. Okay, so people think that they are the same. So people will study karaka and vibhakti together, but karaka is not equal to vibhakti. They're not exactly the same thing. Okay, so a vibhakti can communicate a karaka, but it can also communicate something else. What we call a non-karaka. Okay, so you see how they're a little bit different. It can communicate the karaka, but it also can communicate something else. So they're not exactly the same thing. The vibhakti can communicate the karaka, but it can also talk about something else. And I know this sounds very esoteric. It's not really landing as much, but we'll see examples of this in the first case, when we get to the first case. I know there's a question. So Hariprasadji, you have a question?
Yes, sir. I have a couple of questions. One is, if you look at the top of the page, uh, 68 in my book.
Yeah, page 68.
Yeah, it says on the top, by suffixing different nominal suffixes,
Mhm.
supratyaya, to a pratipadikam, according
Yep.
to the relationship to the verb and the number, different forms of nouns are formed.
Yes.
Okay, but it should be, I think it should be according to the relationship to the verb and number slash vibhakti case.
By suffixing. Yeah, correct. Yep. So
So
according to
they
by
don't use
suffixing
the
different,
word, they don't show case. It should be case also.
it should be case also. Yep. So, but all, so really what they're just trying to communicate here is by adding a supratyaya, or so by adding a pratipadika to a supratyaya, that's what we call declension. That much is what they're trying to communicate. But yeah, you're correct. It should also be by case and number, both.
Okay. Then the other thing is, in page 71,
Mm-hmm.
when we go into uh, ending letters more than one, for example, we talked about Bhagavat and Pachat.
Yeah.
Okay, those suffixes, I don't see them in the listing.
Yeah, that's why I didn't talk about them, because that's more of an advanced topic. It's not a soup suffix. It's a different type of suffix, which gives a different type of noun.
I see. A different
Still,
type of,
you'll get a sup pratyaya, but this sometimes you get other types of suffixes in between the two.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so we don't need to worry about this right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So sometimes to make a pratipadika, we add a suffix to some other pratipadika, and you make a different pratipadika.
So there are, so it is not this 21, it is more than 21.
No, so there's only 21 supratyas, but there's different type of suffixes in general. But supratyas, there's only 21. There may be other type of suffixes though,
Okay.
but not. There's only 21 sup suffixes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
of course. Okay. So vibhakti can communicate a karaka, but all can communicate a non-karaka. So last thing I want to talk about is this chart right here. So this part is on 75, and there's different names for the vibhaktis. So prathama vibhaktihi, it says first case. Now a lot of times there's this third column, it gives the English term. Now they've given the English term based on the karaka that the case is generally connected to. So what I'm trying to say is, when English grammarians were trying to write names for the vibhakti, they equated vibhakti and karaka. But they're different concepts. So really, these English terms are confusing. So what we are going to do is we are not going to refer to the English terms throughout this book. We're only going to use the Sanskrit words, because in the English term, they have basically equated vibhakti is equals to karaka. And so then they've given the names: nominative, accusative, etc. But you might know in other books, these English terms are given. But we just have to know that vibhakti is not the same as karaka, okay? And to differentiate that, we're going to more focus on this 7 Sanskrit names. Okay, so you can repeat after me. Pratama vibhaktihi, dvitiya vibhaktihi, tritiya vibhaktihi, chaturthi vibhaktihi, panchami vibhaktihi, shashti vibhaktihi, saptami vibhaktihi. Okay, so you'll notice that they're all long. They're all ending with long. So pratama, dvitiya, tritiya, then chaturthi, panchami, shashti, saptami. Okay, so you have to make sure that long is there. Your homework is on page 60 of your workbook. Page 60 of your workbook, to fill in that chart, which is on the screen, but on your paper. Okay, so on page 60, at the bottom of page 60 of your workbook, you will fill in the name of the vibhakti, the case, and the English term. But the English term is not as important. So we want to more focus on the learning the names of the vibhakti. Okay, we'll finish here and we'll pick up with this next time. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. So it will become more clear in next class what I mean by karaka and non-karaka. But just know that there's 2 different types, okay? So we'll pick up in 5 minutes. We'll pick up at 8:12 and we'll start our Sadhana Panchakam class then.